everybody, this is Mrs. McQuaid, and today we're going to be talking about science in context and how new technology continually changes the way biologists work and what we can learn about the natural world. We'll also look at some important attitudes for science and some of its limitations. If you'd like to print out these slides to take notes on, you can visit my website at www.7gablescience.com and select Biology, Semester 1, Unit 1. If you have any questions or thoughts, please feel free to comment on the video and I'll respond as soon as I'm able to. The objectives for this section include to list the attitudes important to science, describe the usefulness of peer review in evaluating scientific literature, to differentiate between theories and hypotheses, and to evaluate the importance of biology in making informed decisions. Important vocabulary words include scientific theory, peer review, bias, and scientific law. Good scientists share scientific attitudes or habits of mind that lead them to exploration and discovery. These include curiosity, skepticism, open-mindedness, and creativity. Many scientific investigations begin when somebody asks the question, why or how, so it makes sense that curiosity is an attitude of science. Good scientists are also skeptical. That means they don't accept explanations without evidence. Even though they're skeptical, a scientist must also be open-minded. In other words, they must be willing to accept different ideas that don't agree with their hypothesis when confronted with evidence. And finally, creativity is an important attitude of science because it helps scientists think outside the box and design experiments that'll yield accurate data. Data collection and analysis can be a long and expensive process. Scientists often work for years and sometimes decades trying to answer questions about the natural world. Once they've compiled all of their data, it's time to share it by publishing articles in scientific journals. This allows researchers to share ideas and test and evaluate each other's work. There are many reputable scientific journals, including Nature and Science, that only publish scientific papers after they've undergone a rigorous process called peer review. Now, the word peer might make you think of your friends that perhaps you've had check over your papers and lab reports for mistakes before you hand them in, but scientific peer review is a much more intense and painstaking process. To understand why, it's important to first understand that in science, there are often many different scientists around the world working on answering the same questions. And the person that gets the answer and publishes it first usually gets the most credit. This creates intense competition between scientists and a race to be the first to publish. If someone else publishes your topic before you do, it's called getting scooped, and it's something every scientist fears. Anyway, when you're ready to publish your article, you submit it to a journal, and if it shows enough promise, it'll be sent for peer review. But it's not your friend that reviews your work. It's an anonymous, independent expert that you can trust checking over your paper. They send all of that hard-earned knowledge, your years of research, your data, to other experts that are studying the same thing you are. In other words, your competitors get to see everything you know. Your article will have all the details about experimental conditions, controls, data analysis, conclusions, and their job is to poke as many holes in it as they can find. They look for oversights, unfair influences, fraud, bias, mistakes in technique or reasoning, and then your paper gets sent back to you, and you have to address any and all of their concerns before the journal will publish your article. And while peer review doesn't guarantee a piece of work is correct, it does certify that the work has met the standards set by the scientific community. Now, it seems really risky sending all of your work to your competitors who are trying their hardest to scoop you, so why does the scientific community require it? Well, first and foremost, it keeps people honest, and it prevents them from making outlandish claims that can't be substantiated. For better or for worse, once research is published, it enters a dynamic marketplace of scientific ideas and debate, and can have profound effects on people's health, well-being, and even public policy. Peer review from respectable journals helps make sure only the most robust information that we have a high degree of confidence in makes it into that dynamic. Unfortunately, there are for-profit predatory journals that don't require a rigorous peer review process, and they're very good at creating a product that looks professional and legitimate, but publishes what we commonly call pseudoscience or fake science. A really good example of this occurred in 2017 when an obviously absurd Star Wars themed spoof paper about midichlorians was accepted and published by 4 predatory journals: the American Journal of Medical and Biological Research, the International Journal of Molecular Biology, the Austin Journal of Pharmacology, and the American Journal of Biosciences. There's a link to an article by the author who published the fake journal to expose these predatory journals here if you'd like to go back and visit it. I've also included a list to all of the known predatory journals. These are things that if you were doing research for a project, you wouldn't want to cite any sources from them. Okay, so once we have our article written and it's undergone peer review and been published in a reputable journal, it may become part of a scientific theory. A scientific theory describes a well-tested explanation that unifies a broad range of observations and hypotheses, and that enables scientists to make accurate predictions. This is different than how we use the word theory in everyday language, where saying I have a theory means little more than I have an idea. An important note is that science can change as we discover new evidence. So some theories, as technology gets better and we learn more about the natural world, can be revised. Some important theories for this class include the cell theory, which says that all living things are composed of cells, and Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. It's worth mentioning that today, evolutionary theory is the central organizing principle of all biological and biomedical science. It talks about how species can change over time to become more well adapted to their environments. We have an entire unit devoted to it that we'll do later in the year. A useful theory that has been tested and supported by many lines of evidence may become the dominant view among scientists, but that doesn't mean it can't be updated or modified. Remember, as new evidence is uncovered, theories can be replaced or revised. Now, scientific laws are different from theories in that a law is a concise, specific description of how some aspect of the natural world is expected to behave in a certain situation. For example, the law of gravity says if you drop a penny off a building, it will accelerate towards the earth. So in science, we have hypotheses, which are predictions about what we believe will happen. Remember, a hypothesis has not been tested yet. We have theories which have been tested many times and supported, and then we have laws which are just kind of descriptions about how the natural world will behave in a certain situation. Okay, so now that we know that there is reputable peer-reviewed science we can trust that may or may not become part of scientific theories, and there's also predatory pseudoscience that we should try to avoid, the next question is, why do we need to learn it? And the answer lies in the fact that science both influences society and is influenced by society, and you're part of that society. Just think about all of the science-related decisions you have to make, including decisions about your health and decisions about the environment. This includes things like what you're going to eat, if you're going to exercise, decisions to smoke or use drugs, and in the midst of a global pandemic, decisions that you make every day about when and where you should wear a mask and how much distance you should keep between yourself and others. You also make decisions that affect the environment and in turn will affect your quality of life. Simple choices like, should you put that soda bottle in the trash or the recycle bin? And bigger choices like, should society continue using fossil fuels or transition to more green technologies? All of these questions require not just scientific answers, but economic, political, and moral answers too. And that leads us to our next point. There are limitations to science. Science can explain why or how something happens, but pure science does not include ethical or moral viewpoints. That's one of science's limitations. Science can tell us how certain knowledge or technology can be applied, but not whether it should be applied. Some good examples of this include, should we continue drilling for oil, even though it can cause lasting damage to ecosystems? Should we use current gene editing technology to modify human embryos? We might be able to cure genetic diseases, but it also opens a Pandora's box to human gene engineering where we have designer babies. Should the government and law enforcement agencies have access to individuals' DNA sequences through direct-to-consumer companies like 23andMe or Ancestry.com? These are questions that we as a society have to answer. Science aims to be objective, but scientists may make recommendations that are not in the best public interest due to bias. A bias is a particular preference or point of view that is personal rather than scientific. The public must be educated enough to understand science to make certain that it is applied in ways that benefit all of humanity. In fact, there's an entire field called bioethics devoted to helping us determine when and how we should apply scientific knowledge to best protect all stakeholders. Understanding biology helps us predict the consequences of our actions and take an active role in directing our future and that of our planet. In our society, scientists can make recommendations about public policy decisions, but they don't make the decisions. For example, right now during the coronavirus pandemic, scientists recommend wearing masks whenever possible, and social distancing, which means keeping a 6-foot distance between you and everyone around you. Even with the CDC recommendations, though, only some counties are mandating mask wearing. This is because citizens of our democracy ultimately influence these decisions by voting for elected officials who make those public policies. This is why it's so important we all understand how science works and appreciate both its powers and its limitations. Some final thoughts. Scientists understand that knowledge is never complete and there's always more to be learned. Because of this, science is open to learning that its previous conclusions were inaccurate or incomplete, but that doesn't mean we'll accept any suggestion floated. Scientists are also skeptical. We demand evidence. It's been a very long time since anything new was learned that fundamentally changed human understanding of physical reality. Ultimately, when it comes to questions about the natural world, science and scientific methodology is the best tool we have to find those answers. For more resources, including printable notes, worksheets, and links to online practice, visit my website at www.sevengablescience.com and like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, 7 Gables Science, to keep learning. Thanks for watching.